Hello, everyone. Welcome to my webinar today. This is tips and tricks for building a computer check run more efficiently. Thank you so much for attending. I'm happy to see that you've joined and want to take a look at these payables windows to see if you can do anything more efficiently. I will be taking questions at the end, so if you have any questions, just get ready to put them in the chat if you can, and we will answer those at the end. So with that, let's get started. Again, my name is Cheryl Waswick, and I have been doing AP for many, many years. So I've been doing a lot of support cases, looking at these windows and just noticing how people do things differently from each other in their processes. And most of the time, people say to me, well, that's how someone showed me how to do it. So I just kind of want you to take a look at what's in your build checks window, your edit checks window, know what you're doing, what you could do better. You know, the more familiar you are with that window, the more efficient you can make your process or utilize some of the features that are in that window. So with that, let's get started. I don't have very many slides. So I'm going to start just by looking at the vendor card, a few options on there, and a few things in Payables setup. And we'll spend most of our time on the build computer check window and the edit payment check window. The edit window, I'm not going into the actual vendor payment one. I'm just doing the edit window and the build window. And then I wanted to show you the edit transaction information window at the end as well. So that'll be quick at the end. So on the vendor card, on the options tab, I just wanted to point out a few things here. You can set the payment terms on the vendor card, as you know, and that is going to roll onto all of your transactions that you key. And one thing you can do when you build your check run is to take those terms, those discounts. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the build window on taking those terms. Another thing you can do on the vendor is set a priority rating. So this is basically a fillable field that you can enter whatever you want. You can put a 1, 2, 3, you can put a ABC, you can put a first, middle, last, but basically it's a free fillable field that you can use to pull just that vendor or vendors with that same priority rating into your check run. So let's say you give your vendors a 1, 2, 3 on a 1 with people that you have to pay the most. If you're a small company and you're a little bit strapped for your cash, let's say you only have $50,000 that you need, that you can pay out this week, you may want to pull all your vendors in that are a priority 1 and pay them first. So I'll show you how to restrict on that field to pull them into your check run. So those are more for the smaller companies that are a little bit strapped on the cash. Couple other options on the vendor card. The one payment per is the vendor setting where you can have a lump sum check go to the vendor or a check per invoice for the vendor. So you can set that on the vendor cards. That was a fairly new feature where they put it on the vendor card. So you can have one vendor be paid in lump sum, and you can have your next vendor, maybe you want a check per invoice that they send to you. So you can have vendors be different. And then the last one on the vendor card I wanted to point out is the minimum payment. It defaults to no minimum, but if you want to only pay them a minimum, you can set a percent or a set amount. And if you mark that in your build check window, it will only pay that minimum amount and not the full invoice value. So just pointing out those fields on the vendor card. With that, let's move on to payable settings. So under purchasing setup payables, there's a couple fields I want to point out here in setup that I'll be referencing when we get to the build checks window. The first is the ability to apply. So GP has auto apply features, and you can choose if you want it to apply by the oldest doc date or the oldest due date. So if you use any auto apply features or have the check run apply for you, you can set if it's the oldest doc date or the oldest due date. Below that are your default settings for your computer check run if you want your, and your manual payment window for the checkbook ID. So if you want your checkbook ID to default into your payables check run or manual payment batches, you can set your checkbook ID here. Your check stub is selected here. And you can also list how you want your checks to print out. Do you want your checks to print out by the payment number or the vendor ID? So you can have, when your checks print out, you can have them sorted. The list documents on remittance. So the remittance is basically your remittance form or your check stub. You can have different options for how you have the documents listed on your remittance. You can have invoices only. I'll just show you this here. You can have invoices only, all the documents, an applied order, or only totals. So it defaults to applied order, but you can set the default for that differently, and I will show you a few examples of what those are. And the last one on the bottom left here is a print previously applied documents checkbox. So you can control on your check run if you want documents that were applied since the last check run for that vendor to be included in on this check stub. So if yesterday you applied a credit memo to an invoice, how are they going to know about it unless you tell them? So print previously applied documents does exactly that. When you apply stuff from day to day, it throws it in a temp table and sits there until that vendor gets a check. So the next time they get a check or remittance, you can choose if you want that to print on that check or remittance along with your invoices that you're paying today. So you may not want to tell them about an invoice you applied to a credit memo yesterday, or if you do, mark this and that will print on the top of the check stub as well. A lot of people don't know what print previously applied documents is, but it's exactly what it says. It's printing anything you previously applied since their last check run, sits in a holding table for you to choose if you want to print it on your next check stub or not. And they don't drop out of that table until they're printed, so they'll keep sitting in there until they're printed. There's two options over on the right in the options list I want to point out. The first one is an exclude expired discounts from your payments. So if you don't take a discount in time and want to make sure that you don't take expired discounts, you can mark that, and I'll show you what that does on the billed payment window if you mark that. I've did payables in my past life, and you know, we were always taught to take discounts always, whether they're expired or not. You know, that's your choice. That's kind of what I heard at conferences I used to go to. I always take expired discounts. So you probably don't have yours marked there either, but I just wanted to show you what it does if you mark that. You don't have the ability to take expired discounts on the billed check window if you mark that. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later too. The bottom one I just threw on there because it's kind of a new feature. It allows you to post in summary for your EFT batches or credit card batches to bank rec. That was new, I believe, to 18.6. So GP added it in, but they did not mark it by default. They don't want to give you any surprises. So if you need EFT batches or credit card batches to update bank rec and lump sum, go ahead and mark that. Okay, moving on to the billed payment batch window. That was a mouthful. So I'm going to actually just bring my window up here because you see I got everything in red. I'm going to show you everything in the window. So I'll bring mine up here for you. So the first thing I want you to notice is the top of my window says no check minimum. This says billed payment batch. So if you have, and I'm going to tell you why, if you have Professional Services Tools Library installed, there is a tool in there called PM Minimum Check. If you mark that, it changes the name of the window. And what that does is I can go additional, you get this little box here. can mark to turn it on, and I'm going to say I don't want any checks to print if they're less than $5. I don't want any checks to print if they're less than 99 cents. So you can control what your minimum check is for everybody if you turn that on, but you have to turn it on in Professional Services Tools Library first. So now if anybody has a check less than 99 cents or less than $5, it's not going to print. It's going to hold until they have enough to meet that threshold. So, so now when I enabled that and clicked OK, now I'm on the top of my window shows me my minimum check amount here is $5. So that is an option you can use with Payables from Professional Services Tools Library. The next thing is in your batches. I do encourage you to make your batches unique. So maybe always today's date and your initials. Go ahead and add the batch and go ahead and save it. So one thing about making it unique is it makes troubleshooting easier. If you just name all your batches batch or payables or AP, if you have any problems, it just makes it a little bit harder to troubleshoot. So I like to see unique batches. The other thing is having your initials on it helps for an audit trail. GP doesn't have great audit tracking, so throwing your initials whenever you can on a batch in any module is a good idea because it just kind of gives a record of who did it that's visible to the front end. So if you don't have any audit tracking, it's just always good to make that a habit. So you'll set up your batch there. You all know how to set up batches. This payment option ID. So I have a few different payment options. What you can do is just type in your own new Cheryl, whatever you want to name it. You can add it, and it just has you name it. I'll just put mine. So you can make a new option, and when you go to, let's just say I want Ace Travel here. Whenever you do from and to restriction here, you need to insert it in. I've had a few people lately that did their from and to and clicked build batch. You actually need to click the insert and insert it in. You can set your options down here, and when you go to build your batch, it asks you if you want to save that payment option ID, and let's say I do. So now whenever I come in here, I have that new one saved. If I want to do a check to Ace Travel, I have that saved right in there. I can just pick it. It saved me a couple steps from having to redo all of my options. I have a couple other ones in here too. There's my priority one. So like I told you, these are all the range restrictions you can do: vendor ID, vendor name, class ID, that payment priority. So I have payment priority equal to 1. So I made a default batch that will just pull that if I have limited funds and only want to pay not every vendor, but just certain ones. You also can restrict on the payment number, document number, voucher number. Due date, discount date is very popular, and then the currency. So let's look at due date, discount date. Let me take this out of there. I'm not actually going to use that. So due date, discount date. So if you have net 30 days, you can, if you don't use this, you're going to pull all your open payables, which seems like you wouldn't want to pay everything that's open. If it's not due for another 2 months, why would you pay it now? So due date, you can have it before whatever date you put in. We'll do Friday the 18th. And you have an option for the discount date. Do you not want to take any discounts? Do you want to take all discounts that you meet by that, or put a discount date in? All the discount dates that are same or prior to the date you put in here. Most people put in the same date for the due date as their discount date. And again, you need to insert that in to have it take effect, and then you can build your batch. You can also do multiple if you want to do a vendor, a priority, or a vendor ID range. If you're doing all vendors, you don't need to do a range restriction from first to last. If you don't do vendor ID at all, it will look at all of them. So one thing I wanted to point out on the due dates. So basically this is pulling all discounts that you are eligible for. So down here is a checkbox for taking non-qualifying discounts. If you had marked that checkbox I talked about in payables, right here for exclude expired discounts, if you had marked that, you would not have access to this take non-qualifying discounts. So this taking non-qualifying discounts checkbox is going to take all the discounts even if you don't qualify for them. So if you missed a discount date and you're going to be pulling that into this check run, this checkbox will still take that expired discount. So you didn't qualify for it. So that's what this checkbox is, but you don't have access to that if you have the setup option set to not allow that. Okay, so moving on down, here's the one payment per. You can have one payment per vendor, one payment per invoice, or use however you set it up on the vendor. So remember on the vendor card here, you could set this vendor or invoice right on the vendor card. So it does default to, oh, I moved there it is. If I had it down too far, I wouldn't be able to grab it. It does default to use vendor options, so you might want to pay attention to what you have on your vendors. Obviously, you will notice if you're getting one check per invoice or not, but just be aware of that. This use vendor option hasn't been there forever. I think it's been there for a while, but that you can drive which one you want to do. Down at the bottom of this window, you can have payments, credit memos, and returns automatically apply for you when you build your batch or not. If you don't want anything to apply, make sure that you unmark these when you build your batch. So it will go through and try to apply anything that's unapplied for credit memos, returns, or payments based on your due date or doc date that you set for it to apply to in your setup. So if you don't want things to apply for you, go ahead and unmark those before you build. Down here, here's our list documents and sort that was on our payable setup. So I have applied order and by date. You can control how the invoices are listed on your check stub or remittance. So you have invoices, all documents, applied order, or totals only. So what documents, what documents do you want listed on the check stub or remittance? And how do you want them sorted, by date or document number? So you can control, if you have a test company, go ahead and play with that in a test company and see how you like the check stub or remittance to print. If we have time, I'll show you a little bit of that, and also this print previously applied documents. We already talked about that. Do you want records that applied outside of this check run to also print on your check stub or remittance? Over here, a pay minimum only. We talked about that. If you mark that, remember on the vendor card, you could set a minimum payment to a % or an amount, or the default is none. So if you set someone to minimum payment of $100 and you mark this, it's only going to pay out $100 for that vendor, not the full invoice amount. So that's what the minimum payment is. The apply date over here, if you're automatic applying credit memos, returns, and payments, this is the apply date. It defaults to today's date. I don't think people change that. So those are all the options in the window. And you can go ahead and print or go to the edit payment batch window or edit the vendor payment batch window. We're going to go to the edit payment batch window. Let me go ahead and clear out some of this, and I'll click on edit vendor payment. Yeah, we're just going to start over here. Okay, I'll close this. I'm going to close it and go back in. I had that batch kind of half in there. So if I do, and I'm just going to use test. I know I told you to use a unique one with your initials, but I'm just going to use test. and go ahead and save that batch on my other screen. And I am going to do a vendor that has a $100 invoice and a $50 credit memo. So when I automatically apply existing and I build, it's going to go ahead and apply that $50 credit memo to that $100 invoice. And there's my $50. It automatically applied that for me because I had that marked. If I hadn't marked credit memo, I would have gotten the full invoice amount of $100 here. But since I marked credit memo, it applied it for me. If I go to edit payment batch from here, you don't have to. You can build your batch and go right to your printing, but you do have the ability to go to the edit payment batch window. And I know some people, here's my screen on that. We're going to talk about some different fields in this window. So if you don't have to go to edit payment batch, but if you want to add more to the batch or take some away, you certainly can. So you can see there's my $50 for my CO3 vendor that netted. And I had two older ones here that were fully applied yesterday. And so those still sit here because they will print on the top of the next check stub and then drop off. So this vendor is $50. Let me unmark it and take them out of the batch. It's saying, hey, you got a credit memo applied. Do you want to undo that too? Yes, sure do. So I can undo it. So when I click on the checkbox here, it marks all their invoices over here. So it netted that $50 credit memo to that $100 invoice. Let me unmark it and unselect them again and unapply that credit memo. If I click on the wording here, if I click on a wording, it shows me the documents for that vendor. Then I can just click the $100. I don't have to do the credit memo, and see now my batch, now I'm going to be paying out $100, leaving that credit memo unapplied. So if you click it on the right, you cannot have the credit memos applied. If you click this one on the left, it's going to auto apply it for you. So just know that if you are using this button to click. This button at the top with the check mark is not a mark all, it's a filter just to bring to the top the vendor that you have marked. So it's basically show me who's marked and show me who's not. So it brings my vendor to the top. So let's say that I do want to, let me unmark him again. And let me have it do the $50 instead of the 100. So I'll mark it on the left instead of the right. So I'm back to paying him $50. So this icon over here on the right shows that the credit memo has been applied. Without that icon, then a credit memo would not be applied. So what would be helpful in this window? I hear a lot of people, well, I don't know who CO3 is or whatever. You can click this columns button and you can take that vendor ID off there and put their name on there, or have both vendor ID and name. Maybe I don't want the class ID. Maybe you want the name first. You can move that one up, move them around, click OK. And now I got the vendor name and ID on there if you want it. So you can use this columns button to throw some more fields on there that you want. Same for over here. Well, I got voucher number and the due date and the amount remaining. That doesn't help me. I would like to have also the original document amount. I don't need the voucher number. I want the document number. You can move them around if you want a different order and click OK. So there, now I got the invoice number. So that's a lot more helpful to me than seeing the voucher number. So you can use these column buttons on both sides to add columns, take columns away, and move them around. Again, here's your apply date if anything's auto applying for you, which when you click at the main vendor to select all, it automatically applies for you. If you click on the wording, then you can mark whatever you want and not have it apply. for you. So just remember that as well. If you have a vendor set up for electronic payment, you can see my EFT vendor here has that little electronic icon next to it. So I know I don't want to pull them into my paper check batch with that little icon. So some good little things in here. I did mention if you applied something before and have basically $0 remittances because there's an invoice applied, those vendors also populate this window, and I've had a lot of people say this window takes forever to load when they go into the edit window. Again, you don't have to go in the edit window at all. You can just build your check run and go on and print. But some people do use this window, and if it takes it forever to load, there is something we can do. We can go into your that table that's storing all those remittance records. Is also listing all those vendors down here because it's kind of holding those records to print them on the next pay stub they get. So we could go in and clear those out and get some of these $0 vendors off of your window, and it'll help speed this window up loading for you. Okay, so that's the edit window. And some other things I just wanted to stress. Oops, I missed one. Edit transaction information window. So I don't know if you use this window at all or not, but in your purchasing transactions list, there's an edit transaction information window. And if you put a vendor in here, you can choose what types of documents you want to look at, and usually you're going to look at invoices. And you can use the lookup button to look at their invoices. He only has 2, or you can scroll back and forth with these VCR buttons. So you have an option on an invoice to change the remit to address on it, change the discount date, the due date, the PO number, and the description. If you're going to look at a credit memo, there is no remit to address on a credit memo or discount date or due date. If you're going to look at a finance charge, I don't have any for this vendor, but you do have the option. This is very helpful if you start setting vendors up for EFT and you start assigning a different address ID for EFT. Maybe you want to go into all your existing ones that were already keyed to their address ID where you didn't add banking information, and you want to switch the address ID on it to go to the new one that you set up with banking information. You can also, if you want to make sure something pulls, you can come in here and edit the due date or discount date as well. So that window has been really handy when people have been getting set up on EFT for payables. So I do stress, just for fraud prevention, EFT is the safest, right? It reduces fraud, no more buying check stock, no more lost checks, reissuing checks, no more uncashed checks on your bank reconciliation. It just really does save you a lot of time in the end. So, and you can also email out the remittances, no more printing and mailing. So EFT is a wonderful way to go if you're not using it already. Because just remember, you don't have to include EFT payments because they're already electronic in a positive pay file. So if you're printing paper checks, you'll want to send a positive pay file to the bank. In GP, it's called Safe Pay. It's basically giving a list of checks to your bank so that they can check that everything is valid at the time the check is cashed. Nobody's monkeyed with the payee name or added another 0 to the amount. It's the best way to prevent fraud. But if you do EFT, you don't have to, it's already electronic files, so you don't have to do positive pay anymore either. So electronic is really good for fraud. So think about that if you're not doing that. And if you are doing your paper check, hopefully you're doing some kind of a safe pay or positive pay file as well. One thing I wanted to show you, just a quick little demo here. I did the test batch. I have 2, let me go ahead and just, I'm not going to use that batch. I lost my mouse, hold on. Let me just delete that batch and start over. I updated the status in the back end so that I could delete it. Yeah, do some cleanup on your batches every once in a while. If there are batches in your list, go ahead and just delete them here in your batches window. So in the build check window, I'm just going to do test 2, and I'll go ahead and save that batch. I will do the vendor ID. I'm going to do a vendor. They have one $400 invoice, and I'm going to print previously applied documents on that check stub. So if I go ahead and build it, there's my $400. I'll go ahead and print that to the screen for you. So the only thing I paid was that one invoice for $400, but you can see I had three invoices. I had three invoices and three payments that I applied before today, but they've never printed on the top of a check stub. So when I mark print previously applied documents, they are included in on the remittance, and then their bottom one is the $400 that I'm paying. So if you want those prior apply records to be listed, you would mark that print previously applied documents checkbox here. The other thing is I have my documents listed by applied order. So every invoice has the payment below it that was applied to it, and then they're by date order. So you can see the date order here. So let me go ahead and delete that batch and do it again for you. I think that was my test 2. Let me go ahead and delete that. I had to update a status on it in the back end to be able to do this. Let's go ahead and build it again. I'll do test 3. I like to use unique batch numbers. Go ahead and save that. I'm going to do that same vendor again. This time I'm going to do all documents and by document number. So I'll go ahead and build that. And I'll get my $400. Go ahead and print this check. So you can see how you can control how that check stub or remittance prints. Print that to screen. So here, look at the order here on these. I did by document number order, so all my payments are first, and then my invoices are in, I did by, what did I do by, I did all documents, and I did by document number. So it's going to be in document number order. You can see A, F, J, M. So it printed them in alphabetic order there. My payments first, and then, so you can control what your check stub or remittance looks like by monkeying with these. So hopefully you found some tips or some things that you can utilize better. And I do always plug EFT because for fraud prevention, that's the best way and saves you a lot of time, as I had on my slide. Hopefully, if you didn't know about that edit transaction information window to change remit to address IDs or due dates, that you will begin to utilize that going forward if you need to change anything. So I hope you learned something in those windows that will help you make your check run process more efficient. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat. I would love to answer any of your questions. I do want to let you know there's a couple other webinars coming up. There's an HR one on the 1st with documenting employee actions. AvidXchange is an ISV that has some AP automations. If you are interested in any of that or seeing what they have to say, that's on April 30th. And so we don't have anything that right now for just for GP that I'm doing. I don't have anything scheduled. But if you just recently upgraded to 18.6 or 18.7, I think 18.8 is coming out soon. If you ever want us to go through the new features with you, please let us know. We always like to tell you what all the new features are so that you can make the most out of GP and utilize those. And again, a lot of things you don't know about them if somebody doesn't tell you. So it's always a good idea. With that, I will ask Leah, are there any questions? If you do have any questions.
Where do you find the safe pay?
Okay, let me pull up my GP. So where do you find safe pay is the question. Safe pay is, hopefully when someone did your GP installation, they installed all products. So you would have to go in and mark it on your registration window, but under financial, routines, I'll make routine section bigger here. You should see Safe Pay, both Safe Pay and Electronic Reconcile should be here. You just have to make sure they're installed in your installation media, and you have to mark them in your registration window, and then they should show up under financial routines. So your setup would be here. There's 2 inquiry windows, and then your window that you would use to generate the file is the upload window. Same for electronic reconcile, which is bringing your bank statement to automatically match for your bank reconciliation. Let me see. I just wanted to check that tool setup system registration window quick. Yeah, I'll just make a screen print of this for you. So under tool setup system registration, if it's installed, you do need to mark Safe Pay there. And then you should have it in that routine section of financial. If you need any help setting up, let us know. I would love to help you get it set up if that's something that you need to do. So thank you for your question. If there's any more questions, you know where to find me. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have immediately following. If you think of something today, let me know. But hopefully this was helpful to you today. And again, I thank you for attending. Have a great day, everyone.